Morning guys, so we're back and today we're going to be looking at measures 11 through 19 of Tadihe. Once again, you do not have to watch the whole video. The timestamps for each individual part will be down below, so go ahead and click on your instrument's link and let's get started. First violins, measures 11 through 19. We're going to mark some things before we get started, so get your pencil. First of all, this entire part is divisi, so make sure you know if you're an outside or inside player. Again, just go by what you did for festival. Starting off in measure 11, if you're on the outside, you're going to use an open E for that eighth note. If you're on the inside in measure 11, you're going to use a fourth finger for the A. Okay? In measure 13, if you're on the outside, again, you're going to use an open A and an open E. And then in measure 15, I'm going to go through this whole part for the outside people first. Outside people. The fingerings that are marked are pretty much good. I'm just adding a couple of things. So starting in measure 15, it shows that you're going to be shifting up to a 1. That's third position. I like to mark the position and the finger just to be extremely clear. So for instance, on measure 15, I've marked that you're going up into third position with Roman numeral 3. And it also shows the finger that you're using, which is printed, that first finger. So first finger, second finger, this is still in third position, then you're shifting again, and this is fifth position, so you'd use a Roman numeral 5, and you're shifting up again on that C. Looking at the next measure, measure 16, outside people, the grace notes in there, that's an E, an F natural, and an E. And all of this is in octaves, so the note that's being played on the lower part is the same note that the upper part is playing, just an octave lower. So the grace notes are E, F natural, E, and those fingers are going to touch. So I would recommend marking in the little half-step carets like that to show that your fingers are going to touch. Then, so it's 3, 4, 3 for the grace notes. 1, that's not a shift, that's just where your finger will be. Then I would recommend shifting back to third position on a second finger on the B, and then using the open E to shift down to first. In the next measure, measure 17, the printed fingering is good. You're going to shift up on a first finger to D. It'll be 1, 4 in third position. And then in measure 18, I would not use a first finger. I would not do what's printed. I would just stay in third position and then use a harmonic right there. So starting in third position here, you're just going to stay in third, second finger for this E, and then I've added the little harmonic indication up there, the little circle above the 4 to show that you're going to use a harmonic, and we're going to go over all of this in a second. Inside people, in measure 15, just first position, open A. 16, go ahead and just use first position there too. Then in measure 18, just use a fourth finger for that E, the second note. Okay, so the good news is the rhythms are all the same as yesterday. There's nothing that we didn't cover. So for instance, in measure 11, you've got half, note, triple, eighth note, hold. Ba, 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 da, ba. Okay? And the only other rhythm that you have is in 15, and it's just straight triplets, quarter note triplets. So rest, rest, triplet. All right, so let's play through some of these more difficult measures. I'm going to go ahead and do the lower part, the inside people's part first. Outside people, you should play along with this so that you can learn what it sounds like. The only thing I want to point out with the lower part is in measure 16, those grace notes are going to happen before the beat. So if you're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, da da da, that third note, the E, that's actually an eighth note, is going to be on the beat. So it's going to sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would recommend practicing that part by itself a few times. Okay, so now let's jump to the upper part and talk about some of these shifts. So starting at measure 11, you should be on a fourth finger. Just open E there, starting on an up bow. Then during the shift, or sorry, during the rest in measure 15, that's when you're going to shift to third position. And then fifth position, your thumb goes into the crook of the neck, and your first finger is on C. So let's watch that again. Then your third finger goes down right where it is on E, and then this grace note is going to touch. The fingers are going to touch like that. 1, shift down to third, open E, low 2. So let's look at that again. And one more time. Fifth. And then in tempo. And you're going to use a harmonic right there, okay? Remember, when you're doing a harmonic, you have to make sure that no other fingers are touching the string. You're going to straighten your pinky out and use the pad and not push all the way down. So this part is a little trickier than yesterday, especially if you're on the outside, but just practice it slowly, go note by note, isolate the shifts, and you'll be able to get it. So I'm going to play all the way through once the lower part, and I've got the metronome at 86, so I'm going to play once through with the lower part and then once through with the upper part. Here we go. Here's the lower part. 1, 2, and go. And there is a fermata on that last note, so you get to be the conductor and decide how long you're going to hold it. Okay, here's the upper part. Ready? 1, 2, and go. Like I said, practice it slowly, note by note, work on those shifts. If you have any questions, I think I've got my Zoom office hours working, so you can call in today at 11. And good luck, happy practicing, and I'll see you tomorrow. Right, let's take a look at the second violin part. Now, as you probably have figured out, this is very similar to what we did yesterday. In fact, almost identical, but that's okay. It just means you have an easy practice day. There's just a couple things I want you to mark in before we get started. In measure 15, that same bowing pattern we had before with the double up. So on the third note of the measure, you're going to mark a down bow, and then the last note is an up bow, so that that double up is a little easier to see starting in measure, the last note of measure 15 and into measure 16. Okay, and the only other thing that you need to mark is measure 18. You have a G sharp. A G sharp is the same as an A flat, so you're going to play it with a low 1. Okay, notice there's also a fermata on this note, so you get to be the conductor and decide how long you're going to hold it. That's really all I wanted to point out. Just make sure, just like yesterday, when you're doing your 8th note up bows, you're coming off the string a little bit and then setting it back down on the following 8th note rest. So I'm going to put the metronome in my ear and play through measures 11 through 19. 1, 2, ready, go. One thing I didn't mention is there is a divisi part in measure 14. So if you're on the inside, you'll play the C, and if you're on the outside, you'll play the D. Go ahead and play it with the 4th finger if it's going to be in tune, or you can use an open. That's all I got for you today. I will see you back tomorrow for the next section. All right, hi Violas. So we're going to take a look at these measures. You've probably already noticed these are very similar to yesterday's, in fact, almost identical. That's okay, it just means you have a really easy practice day and you can focus on some of your other classes. So there are just a couple things I want you to mark in. In measure 15, we're going to mark the same bowing that we talked about yesterday. You're going to mark the last two notes of measure 15 as a down and an up, just to make that double up going into measure 16 a little more apparent and easier to see. In measure 17, you're going to play both of those Ds with a fourth finger, so mark that in. And then measure 18, you have a G sharp. That's the same as an A flat, so you're going to use a low 1. And then the last note of measure 18 is a B, and it's going to be a high 2. So you're going to be stretching from a low 1 to a high 2. So that's what that's going to look like. Low 1 here. And then I just reminded myself with a little arrow up and a 2 to remember that there's that big space right there. Okay. That's pretty much all I have to say about this part. Just continue to make sure that your articulation is crisp. You want to lift your bow off the string on the eighth notes and then set it down on the following eighth rest. In measure 14, you have that tie again. So it's going to be rest and 2 and 3 and 4 and make sure you hold it all the way to the end of the measure. I'm going to set my metronome and play through this part for you guys. 2, ready, go. That's it for today. I will see you back here tomorrow for the next section. All right, cellos, your part today is very similar to yesterday. I don't think it's going to give you any trouble. I just want you to mark one thing. Take a look at measure 15. You've got that same bowing thing where you've got a double up, but it's not really marked very well. So go ahead and mark the last two the last two notes of measure 15 as a down and an up. And all that's going to do is make the double up going into measure 16 a little clearer and more apparent for you. Other than that, just make sure when you're playing this that your articulation is nice and crisp. You're going off the string on the eighth notes and setting back down on the eighth rests. You've got a tie in measure 14, so make sure you're holding it all the way through to the end of the measure. So that would be rest and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you're off. I'm going to go ahead and put a metronome in my ear and play through this. If you want to play along, go for it. Here we go. 2, ready, go. That's it for today. I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next part. Bases, your part today is very similar to yesterday with just a couple of extra things added in. The only thing that I will point out is the rhythms. Again, you've got 1, 2, triplet. I'm talking about measure 12 and measure 14 here. And then measure 16 is exactly the same as measure 8. So you've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and ba, 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 ba. Other than that, it's really straightforward. You've got a fermata on the last note in measure 18. You might notice that in measure 14, you've got accents marked where you did not have them in measure 6. So just make sure you bring that out and we'll be good to go. All right, I'm going to put a metronome in my ear and I'm going to play through this part. Feel free to play along with me. 2, ready, go. That's it for today, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next part.